Hello, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Welcome once again to my channel. Just yesterday, New Zealand dismissed its High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. So, what's a High Commissioner? Commonwealth countries don't appoint ambassadors to other Commonwealth countries, they appoint High Commissioners. And rather than say embassies, they say High Commission on the basis that in the Commonwealth of Nations, they're not really foreign to each other, but it's the same post as ambassador. So Phil Goff was sacked. Now, Sir Henry Wotton, or Wooten, should I pronounce it, is 16th century diplomat or early 17th century, and he notoriously said, "An ambassador is an honest man sent abroad to lie for the good of his country." Um, and so it is with diplomacy, using so-called diplomatic language, dissembling, using half truths, and quite often simply uh, having a filter. Don't disclose things that would be offensive to the other side. Zelensky's going to have to grovel for his country's life, and Phil Goff, I completely agree with him, but it was undiplomatic at least to say it. You've got to keep stum. Now, Donald J. Trump is America's chief diplomat, and he is a notoriously undiplomatic person, shoot from the lip. He's also an absolute ignoramus. So there he's got a bust of Churchill in the Oval Office, but of course Churchill was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in the Second World War, and he was an anti-appeaser from day one. Said Germany mustn't be allowed to rearm, they mustn't be allowed to get away with breaking the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Take a firm stand on this. War in 1938, even though the United Kingdom was not militarily prepared, and the chiefs of Imperial General Staff said that the United Kingdom would lose. Um, but I wouldn't expect Trump to know that, a man who's never read a book in his life. I suppose he just sees that Churchill's the all-round tough guy, and some of that's true. But Churchill was an appeaser too. We forget this. After the Second World War, he appeased the Soviet Union. He let them take over some of Poland. He let them establish puppet regimes in Eastern Europe. You're going to go to war about that? No, because he didn't have the strength to do so, and so on. So he tried to achieve a détente with the Soviet Union back in the mid 1950s when he returned as prime minister. Right. So Phil Goff, he should have known better. And he rightly wrote, President restored the bust of Churchill at the Oval Office, but do you think he really understands history? Impliedly, he does not. So the Foreign Minister of New Zealand, Winston Peters, has said how disappointed he is with Mr. Goff, and it just was not sustainable to keep him on post. So he's been dismissed forthwith, because obviously that will cause estrangement with the United States, even though what Mr. Goff said was on the money. It's unbecoming for someone who holds that office to speak with such candor. And Goff approvingly quoted what Winston Churchill had said again about the Prime Minister at the time, Neville Chamberlain. You had a choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, yet you will have war. Well, actually, war was still avoidable if they'd continued appeasement. It was possible that Germany wouldn't try expanding again. And there was some within the Nazi elite, Hermann Goering, who said, let's not invade Poland. Let's quit whilst we're ahead. We've taken Austria without a drop of blood spilled. We've taken the Sudetenland, not a drop of blood spilled. We've taken the remainder of Czechoslovakia. Let's stop there. And then, we've almost doubled our territory and without any losses. And we still have normal diplomatic relations with France, the United Kingdom, everywhere else. They're not happy about it, but they hadn't even imposed sanctions. So no need to have a second world war. And obviously, Goering was incorrect. There was a possibility that the Third Reich would be deterred, but they weren't deterred, possibly because they didn't think that France, the United Kingdom, would follow through. Joachim Ribbentrop, not von Ribbentrop, don't let him get away with that, their foreign minister, he assured Adolf Hitler and the others that France and the United Kingdom were bluffing. They could call their bluff, that they were spineless and they would not proclaim war against Germany in 1939, and they did. Having said that, obviously, Germany invaded Poland the 1st of September 1939, France and the UK dithered for 2 days before actually doing it, seeing if there's a way they could back out, because a war against an industrial superpower was going to lead to millions of deaths. And it was very, very hard to see how they could win against Germany when France, the United Kingdom, had very little offensive capacity, not that many tanks. So a ground war by the 1930s had to be fought with an awful lot of tanks. Anyway, so then we go on. Now, Mr. Gough, he really ought to have known better. He's been in politics for a long time. He's in his 70s. He was mayor of Auckland, which is New Zealand's biggest city, for years. He even was leader of the opposition, the New Zealand Labour Party, and he's held a number of ministerial posts, including foreign affairs. So you think he would know a bit more about international relations. He's 79. Is he going slightly soft in the head to say this? So that's why he's been dismissed. Because although what he said is absolutely accurate, it's unhelpful to New Zealand's diplomatic relations with the United States. New Zealand is part of the Five Eyes, that intelligence sharing agreement with the United States, Australia, who else? Canada and the United Kingdom. Another thing is, about 20 years ago, the New Zealand armed forces were cut to almost nothing, and then they're expecting Australia to come and help them. Now, New Zealand's a very prosperous country. They might have to ramp up this. They realize they live in a more dangerous world. They think countries don't simply try to annex each other anymore, but they do, as Russia's proven. Now, Russia's very far away, I think, and Russia's got no designs in New Zealand, but they're worried about China, their bigger neighbor, or somebody else. You know, cutting back your military, say, because we don't intend to have a war, is like saying, we're not going to have a fire alarm because we don't intend to have a fire. Of course, you don't want to have one, but it might happen anyway. And the other thing about militaries is not just in case it happens, is to prevent it happening. Okay, is prevention is better than cure. Deterrence. Put yourself in the mind of a mugger. You don't want to take on a heavyweight boxing champion. They want to take on a grandmother. They'll go for an easy victim. So don't be that easy victim. Now, I realize this can go the other way, an arms race, which leads to rising tensions, and people precipitate war, so-called preventative war. Let's defeat them now whilst we still have advantage, before they get too strong. The sort of thing that led to the First World War. One thing is, wars can kill people, not just by people being shot and blown up and so forth, but also by poverty in some of the developing world, spending eye-watering sums on armaments, and there's very little left for food, for medicine, for sanitation, for anything of that nature. So impoverishing themselves, you know, some of these modern combat planes costing like well over $100 million. So I wonder who the next New Zealand High Commissioner to the Court of St. James is. Notably, High Commissioners and Ambassadors of the United Kingdom are called to the Court of St. James, since that is the official residence of the British royal family. It's not Buckingham Palace. It's just across the street from Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace is much larger, is iconic, open to the public. St. James's never is. St. James's is far smaller, more modest. Some of it early 16th century, when Henry VIII, when he closed down the friary there, the dissolution of the monasteries from 1534 onwards, seized their property. And said, well, I'm going to use this as a royal palace. But the royal family hardly ever spent any time there, though notably the proclamators of the new monarch, that's where they read their proclamation. So Philip Gough really ought to have known better, and perhaps he will learn to put a sock in it sometimes, because it's what you don't say is as important as what you do say, quite often in diplomacy. Really avoiding offense, using so-called diplomatic language, being tactful. It often comes across as mealy-mouthed, but that's it. Right, thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.